Hi everyone, welcome again to another English with Joseph. Okay, today we're going to look at the mixed conditionals. In my teaching practice over the last week, the mixed conditionals have been something which has came up again and again. And I think we need some clarity on them. I do have a booklet on the conditionals, so if you really don't understand them, or if you need further support, write to me, and I will happily send you my booklet, which is called, predictably, the conditionals. Okay, so don't be afraid to ask for that. It's completely free if you're watching this podcast. Right, the mixed conditionals falls into a much bigger category. So before we talk about the mixed conditionals, we have to talk about the other conditionals and what they are, okay? So the conditionals is a way of talking in English about things which haven't happened. They might happen. Maybe when you're talking about ideas, they could happen in the future, but they're things which aren't real, okay? So I'm going to quickly run through some conditional examples until we get to the mixed conditionals, and then I'll explain more about how they work. Okay, so imagine a sentence. If it rains, the grass gets wet. If it rains, the grass gets wet. Okay, that's a zero conditional. Zero conditional. If it rains, the grass gets wet. Okay, we're talking about what always happens. If it rains, the grass gets wet. That's it. It's what always happens. So we use the present and present. Okay. If I cook, people die. It always happens. So that's a joke. So again, present and present. If this thing happens, that thing happens. Cause and effect. Okay. So it's talking about regular things. Okay. Type 1 conditional. If it rains, the grass will get wet. So here we're not talking about general things, we're talking about a specific example and what probably will happen. It's not hypothetical, we're saying it probably will happen. Okay? It probably will. If it rains today, for example, the grass will get wet. That's the present and the future. If it rains, present tense, the grass will get wet, future tense. Okay? That's a type 1 conditional. So just to go over those two again, zero conditional is when we have something which always happens. If I cook, people die, for example. If it rains, the grass gets wet. It's repetitive, it's always that way and it doesn't change. Okay? It's for everything. That's a zero conditional. Type 1 conditional, if it rains the grass will get wet because it probably will happen. Type 2 is formed with the past tense and then the present conditional, which is would. Okay, so if it rained, the grass would get wet. Okay, if I spoke Russian, I would live in Russia. So we're talking about something which may have happened in the past. If that had happened, for example, I would be doing that other thing. So if I spoke Italian, I would be living in Italy. Okay, so we're talking hypothetically. Remember, this isn't real, so it's not really something from the past. It's not really something from the past. The type 3 conditional, which is the next one, really is from the past. Okay, and again, it's hypothetical completely. If I had learned Italian, I would have lived in Italy. If I had learned Italian, I would have lived in Italy. Okay. If it had rained, the grass would have gotten wet. Okay. So a moment ago we spoke about the 0 in the first conditional. Let's quickly just go over points 2 and 3. So the second one there, if I spoke Italian, I would be living in Italy, or I would live in Italy. It's formed by the past tense in the present conditional or the present conditional continuous. Would or would be doing, for example. So in our continuing example, if it rained, the grass would be wet. Okay, so remember, if it rains, the grass gets wet. If it rains, the grass will get wet. If it rained, the grass would be wet. Okay, and the next one, which is a type 3, is formed with the past perfect and also with the present perfect conditional would have. Okay, so that would be, if it had rained, the grass would have gotten wet. Okay, now that gives you a very quick idea of the conditionals, but where the mixed conditional comes in, it comes in when you take the first part of the part 3 and the second part of the part 2. And the reason why you have to do that is because it's the only way you can talk about something that happened in the past and its effect now. For example, if it hadn't rained last night, we wouldn't be wet now. Okay? If we had looked at the map last night, we wouldn't be lost now. Okay, so the obvious question there is, you can hear that I'm taking part 3 and putting it with part 2. Why don't I use just part 2? Well, the reason for that is because remember that when we're talking about the past generally, okay, we use the past tense, but we can also use the present perfect. Okay, in the type 2 example, we were looking at something which was completely hypothetical if it had happened in the past, okay? But in the type 3 example, we were looking at what happened maybe last night. For example, if I had lost my keys, if I hadn't lost my keys yesterday, I wouldn't be lost now, okay? And we're comparing two different points of time here. So you take the part of part 3 and you add it on to the part of part 2 to create a scenario of, if that hadn't happened in the past, then this thing wouldn't be happening now. And you can only do that by joining the 2 and the 3. Confused? Yes, I thought you might be. As for my book, it might explain it a little bit better. But essentially, a mixed conditional is you take the part 3 and you add it on to part 2, because part 2 alone would not give you that same feeling of the past coming into the present, and part 3 alone runs from the past to another point in the past. So to go from the past to the effect it's having now, you have to take 3 and 2 and mix them. Okay? That's it. It's not as difficult as it sounds, as I always say. It's about practice. If you just read it on paper, it's going to be hellishly complicated. You need to bring it alive by using it and speaking it. Speaking is the quickest and best way to be moving forward. Okay? Right. Few things before I finish off. Do please continue to send me your favorite music. It's something I'd like to continue doing because it's interactive and I want you to contact me. Okay, feedback is always welcome. You can contact me by leaving comments here on Dailymotion, by my blog in WordPress, englishwithjosephblog.wordpress.com. You can catch me on Twitter, McTaggartJ7, Facebook, facebook.com englishwithjoseph. I'm on Google Plus as well. Don't ask me how it works because I have no idea. I don't think anyone knows how Google Plus works, do they? I don't think so. Anyway, those are the conditional tenses, and I hope this has been useful. Okay, thank you so much and goodbye.